Hi, it's Iran, and thank you for watching again. I'm back in the heart of London, and today I want to talk about whether it's wise or sensible to buy a new build and what the particular risks. I'm speaking to a lot of remote investors right now who are considering and thinking about buying a new build or buying off plan, and they've been asking me what I think about it. So I just thought I'd put my point of view out there as I think it can add real value for you. I can see that if you're buying a property, and especially if you live abroad, that when you see a property through a shiny brochure and marketing material, that it gives an added sense of certainty and comfort that you're buying something new with no errors and it's all shiny and looks good and perfect. Um, especially all these brochures and websites can make things look really good and very impressive and maybe impressive to friends who you might show it to. However, there are some real risks in buying a new build that many investors aren't aware of, and especially remote and international buyers need to be very mindful of these so that they don't actually walk into a trap. So, one of the most important risks and facts nearly when you buy a new build property is that you will be buying above the true market price. And that means that you will be locking in a loss from the moment that you buy the property. Um, and that is never a good idea, in my view, and it can actually take decades to recover from that loss. Also, there will be little evidence of resale values for that particular new build property as it will be new. So the market won't know how to price property being sold. If for whatever reason you wanted to sell the property, again, it would be very hard for you to recover the price that you've actually paid. So you need to be mindful of that. And also, mortgage providers, if you want to get bank lending on the property in the future or even now, the mortgage providers will very likely know this. So they will actually assume that the true value of the property is a lot lower than the price that you paid for it. And another thing to keep in mind that often the leases for these properties, they are more onerous, they are more difficult and complicated. They have higher service charges, which pay for the management of the building, higher ground rents, and sometimes they can also be restrictive for letting the property on, overall or letting for a short lease. And this means that if you think about it from a cash flow perspective, the property might indeed become more of a liability than an asset. Something that I have come to understand is that especially with rising build costs, that the build quality of new homes is often not as good as the traditional, say, Victorian, Georgian buildings where you have traditional brick. They are just not as robust, not as solid. So that's sometimes hard to imagine that something more modern would be not of the same quality than the more historic building, but that is actually more often the case than not. There's also a risk, in my view, of undiscovered risks in the building and to build safety that might not have been fully discovered yet. For example, as we all know from the terrible fire at Grenfell, that made everyone realize that some cladding that had been used on many new builds wasn't actually safe. And those people then who had purchased these buildings with unsafe cladding found themselves experiencing huge losses because they were unable to sell these properties and the values, the capital values that they have would have depreciated hugely. Um, and while a new build, this final point is particularly sensitive, but something that I think remote and international buyers, especially Swedes, need to be mindful of. that while a new build might look very impressive to friends and also be very much in line with the values in Sweden, which do prefer a new build, um, some people in Britain might actually think that a new build, if bought as an own home, might be slightly lacking in taste. Now, I know that's sensitive, but values do differ in different countries, and it's something that you maybe want to be mindful of, especially if you're buying the property as a home for a much loved child in order to give them the best possible start to integrate into British life. So instead, buying an older property uh, is far less risky and, in my view, uh, gives a lot better and robust values. You also get more charm and grace with these buildings. So, for example, when you buy, there's a much better opportunity to negotiate the price and do it well. Um, and especially if you use somebody, a professional property buyer like myself, who can really support you to negotiate well on the price. And that's much easier than with a new build. And therefore, you're far more secure in the value retention in terms of what you're buying, because there are so many more examples of resale value of the old stock around. So it's a much safer investment, and that also makes banks and mortgage companies a lot more secure. And should you wish to sell the asset, it will be much easier to reclaim what you've invested. And indeed, the old stock might also go up in value a lot stronger than new builds, which would more depreciate in value. You'll also find that the annual service charges and ground rents are a lot more reasonable in old housing stock. Obviously, this varies very much from house to house, but it is normally much more reasonable. You can also see whether or not the property has been properly managed over the years. And that's something that's hugely valuable and you can't see with a new build. It's more of a promise, but you can't see it, so there's no evidence and therefore greater risk. And also, it's easier to let buildings or let flats in traditional housing stock, whether it's a normal let or for short lets. Obviously, you have to check whether the lease allows it. But in smaller blocks of flats where you're looking at a traditional Victorian or Georgian house, then it's simply a share of freehold, and it's up to the freeholders themselves to decide, I yourself. So, and finally, despite having lived and worked abroad and lived in Sweden, but now lived also in England since 1998, I know that traditional houses can sometimes be deemed to be more graceful and nice, as valued by the local British. And sometimes, if you're arriving from abroad, that might take you or your child years to discover, and then it can be expensive to have to buy again. Um, so, my recommendation to you, if you are looking to buy a property in London, is to absolutely not go for a new build. However flashy or appealing or safe or secure it might appear, it's anything but that. So don't let your emotions fly away from seeing the beautiful pictures. You need to really focus on buying real substance as opposed to style. And by using a personal property shopper like myself, I can help you to make the whole process as easy and as effortless as possible from start to finish by being your person on the ground and helping with negotiations and helping you throughout to make sure that it's easier, more effortless, and you save money and you also save time. And in the process, you're buying real value and real substance, often with style and grace, that can hopefully last for a very long time. I hope to be at your service. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. Bye.